If you're claiming real estate professional status, there's one mistake that wipes it out instantly. Not your properties, not your income, your time logs. I've seen audits where the taxpayer did everything right. The hours were there, the work was real, but the logs looked too perfect, and the IRS rejected everything. Because when every single day looks exactly the same, the IRS doesn't think you're organized. They think you're lying.
Wait, so the work can be completely real, but if the paperwork looks too clean, you're done?
This case involved someone who owned 4 rental properties, 3 single-family homes, and 1 small apartment building. They had a full-time W-2 job as an accountant. Good salary, benefits, stable. But after work and on weekends, they were managing their rentals. Tenant calls at 9 p.m. about a broken heater, coordinating plumbers on Saturday mornings, reviewing lease agreements on Sunday afternoons, bookkeeping late at night. They kept a spreadsheet, logged their hours, tracked every phone call, every site visit, every hour spent reviewing financials. And according to their logs, they consistently worked around 4 to 5 hours per day on real estate activities, almost every single day. For the entire year, the work was real. They weren't making it up. But that's not how the IRS saw it.
That honestly sounds like everyone I know who has rentals. You do the work whenever you can squeeze it in.
Exactly, and that's the problem. When the IRS sent the audit notice, they specifically asked for contemporaneous time logs, proof that the hours were tracked as they happened, not reconstructed later. So this taxpayer pulled out their spreadsheet, submitted it, and probably felt confident. The log showed 4.5 hours per day, Monday through Sunday, almost no variation. Same start time, same end time, same types of tasks listed. Week 1 looked like week 10. Week 10 looked like week 30. Week 30 looked like week 52. To most people, that looks disciplined. It looks like someone who takes their record-keeping seriously. But when the IRS agent reviewed those logs, they didn't see discipline. They saw a pattern that didn't match human behavior. The IRS has reviewed tens of thousands of real estate professional cases. They know what real-time logs look like, and real-time logs are messy. Some days you work 6 hours because a tenant moved out and you're coordinating cleaners, painters, and new showings. Some days you work 15 minutes because you just answered 1 email. Some days you don't work at all because you were traveling or sick or busy with your W-2 job. Real life has interruptions, emergencies, vacations, sick days, days where you just didn't feel like dealing with real estate. But when someone submits logs that show 4.5 hours every single day for 365 days straight, the IRS doesn't evaluate that based on possibility. They evaluate it based on probability. And the probability that someone worked exactly the same amount of time every single day for an entire year, essentially 0. The IRS also looks at the timestamps. In this case, the logs showed work happening from 7 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. almost every night. Perfect blocks, no variation. No nights where they logged 4 hours on Monday, but then made up for it with 7 hours on Wednesday. No weeks where they worked extra because a property had an issue. No weeks where they barely worked because they were on vacation. So the IRS reached a very simple conclusion. These logs weren't created in real time. They were created later, probably right before the audit. And probably by taking the total hours needed for real estate professional status and dividing by 365 days. And once the IRS decides your logs were backfilled, it doesn't matter if the work actually happened. Because at that point, they don't believe anything you're saying.
So once credibility is gone, the whole case collapses? There's no way to fix it?
There's no way to fix it. The IRS rejected the time logs entirely. And once those logs were rejected, the real estate professional status failed. And once that status failed, all of the passive losses that had been deducted in prior years were disallowed. This wasn't just 1 year. It was 3 years. Year 1, roughly $28,000 in additional tax owed. Year 2, $32,000. Year 3, $24,000. Plus accuracy-related penalties, plus interest compounding from the original due dates. Total exposure? Somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000. And because this was an audit, not a voluntary disclosure, There was no option to amend, no option to submit better logs, no option to reconstruct anything. The damage was final.
Oh, that's not a paperwork problem. That's life-changing money.
For most people, yes, it absolutely is. And here's what makes this even harder. The taxpayer in this case really did do the work. The hours were real. The properties were real. The management activities were real. But none of that mattered. Because once the IRS questioned the credibility of the logs, there was no evidence left to stand on. You can't go back in time and relog your hours. You can't produce text messages or emails from a year ago that prove you were working at 9 p.m. on a random Tuesday. You can't rebuild trust once it's gone. That's why timing matters. That's why documentation matters. Not just that you did it, but how it looks when someone who doesn't trust you is evaluating it. This case wasn't about hours. It wasn't about effort. It wasn't even really about real estate. It was about credibility. The IRS doesn't start by believing you. They start by looking for patterns that don't make sense. And when they find one, they stop listening. Real-time logs look messy. They have variation. Some days are heavy. Some days are light. Some weeks you barely worked. Some weeks you worked constantly. If your logs are too perfect, they don't look real, even if they are. And I know that sounds unfair, but fair doesn't matter in an audit. What matters is whether the IRS believes you. If this made you uncomfortable, that's the right reaction. Because tax planning only works if you think about it before the IRS asks. Once the audit starts, your options are gone. This wasn't the only issue in this audit, but it was the one that ended it. If you want to understand how the IRS actually evaluates proof, not just what the tax code says, this channel is for you. I break down real cases, real audits, real consequences. Subscribe if you want to see more.